Danger. Once you get into the desert, there's no going back, said the camel driver. And when you can't go back, you have to worry only about the best way of moving forward. The rest is up to Allah, including the danger.
Good afternoon, Young Kings. I'm going to pick up where I left off at from the absence of willpower. This is going to be the absence of willpower 2. And if you haven't seen the first video, stop now. Hit the like button, then press pause, and then go back and review the first video. And if you watch that video, like that video too, and then we can continue on to part 2. But part 2, we're talking about getting into where Adam and Eve have eaten from the fruit of the tree of good and evil, eating the fruit, and they're trying to hide from God. And then go back to verse 8. It says, the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God, and he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees in the garden. So now, who created the trees in the garden? He told you you can have everything except this one tree in the garden. And then instead of going in your abundance, you go out of the one thing he told you not to do is the thing that you do. And now you want to hide in those same trees. The rationale of us in the fallen state, sometimes we don't make logical decisions. Sometimes we make emotional decisions. Sometimes we are talked into things that we should have never considered having a conversation about. And that's how Will Smith can get up and assault Chris Rock. But verse 9, it says, but the Lord God called to men and says, where are you? And God knows where you are, but he wants to identify with you and see, do you know where you are? So it wasn't that God was roaming around the garden like, hey, I wonder, I'm having a hard time finding him. He wants you to find yourself and recognize your distance from him. So he says, but the Lord God called and said, man, where are you? And he answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. So he said, hey, I heard you, but like somebody come knock on your door and, in the morning and you haven't got out of bed yet. And you're like, man, I'm not dressed. I'm not ready for company. And you may even act like you're not home. You might not even want to go to the door because you're not ready. And that's kind of what Adam would say, hey, I had to hide. I wasn't ready to see you. Like, I wasn't expecting you to be coming this soon. I was thinking I was going to have some time to get my story right. And, I was going to have some time to confer with my lady, see what was going on. He didn't have that because soon as the sin, then God had to come address the issue. So it says, he answered, said, I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And the Lord said to him and said, who told you you were naked? Like, where'd you get that information from? Because in the beginning, you was naked and ashamed and unashamed. There was no shame in there. And we commune like Father in creation. Like, there was nothing in between us. So who told you that you were naked? And he says, have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to? Like, that is where you got that information from, that you were naked, because you're eating from fruits that you were never supposed to eat from. And Will Smith, Andrew Morton, and the person that's watching this video are all guilty of eating from forbidden fruits. And we're getting results that we were never supposed to have. So we're hiding because we're ashamed, we're naked. And sometimes in that hiding, we act out of emotions, out of rage, and we're getting things. It seems like we're being a man, and they would probably have some false identity about what it takes to be a man. And we'll tackle that, probably not on this video, but we'll come to that. But we listen to other people, our spouses are listening to other people, and we are absent, and we're not really walking in our higher self. So it says, have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to? Then the man says, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. The woman that he pulled from his side is now in front of him, leading him. And she's giving him fruit to eat. And he ate it. Jada Smith gave Will some fruit to eat. She gave him an entanglement. She gave him a lot of disrespect. She's given him all this infatuation with Tupac. She's given him all this fruit for Will to eat. When Will is eating, he ate that fruit. He wants his marriage to work. And there's nothing wrong with, I was there. There's nothing wrong with wanting a relationship to work. But you got to lead. It can't work to your detriment where everybody else is living their best life and that you there and you just call yourself the sacrificial lamb. No, when she came from his side and she went in front and she started feeding him fruit, that's the root cause of why he started acting out of his emotional rage later down the line, because he's no longer leading. It started with a red table talk with both of them on there, and they were both there, even though you can see in his eye he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be there. Eyes were red, and you can tell he was holding back the tears. But it went from a collective couple red tabletop discussion to some of these discussions Will ain't even there no more. And their mouth is just as reckless as can be about his inadequacies, about what she desires out of a man, and she describing attributes that he hasn't been displaying in the relationship. She describing attributes of other men and stuff like that, and stuff of that nature. So it went from a collective, okay, let's show the world that we have this open, honest relationship while we're here together, and you can tell it was a front. And it graduated to the stance of now she's passing back this fruit. And the man said, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. Then the Lord God said to the woman, what is this that you have done? The woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate it. So everybody's passing accountability. Nobody's taking accountability anymore. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you from above all the livestock and wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat the dust the rest of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman. If Will Smith and Jada are walking in unity, that joke doesn't bother them that much. It's just a reflection of the dysfunction and stuff that's going on in that relationship. And it had to come out, because that fruit that she gave Will, like when the joke came off in the Oscars and Will laughed, Jada turned around and gave him the fruit of a look. Like, you laughing at this shit? Excuse my language. You laughing? You gonna go handle this? And he had to, people say he had to respond. Or did he? But he did. He responded after he ate that fruit of that look. And then he got in an emotional rage and he went up and he assaulted the man. So you got to understand, like, this stuff didn't start at the Oscars. And it's not going to end there. Until they get their union together, there's going to be other incidents that's going to continue to spill out until she gets back by your side and then stop trying to be in these streets. Message to Young King. If they want to be in the streets, let them go. Let them go. Do not convince anybody to be with you. You don't need to do that. There will be someone there that would appreciate your leadership, your skill set, and they will honor you, because it says when you were created a little lower than angels, that you were bestowed honor and glory. So if they can't bring those attributes out of you of honor and glory, then you need to start wondering if this is the one that is supposed to be by your side, let alone the one that you're supposed to be following. Because I already said, don't follow. You were created to lead. And this is not something that I say from an abuse of power, like, Women can't lead. It's not that, you can't have a woman supervisor or that you can't have a woman president of a country. I'm not saying none of that. I'm saying inside your home, who you choose to marry or who you choose to be with, it's not somebody you're supposed to be following. It's someone you're supposed to be leading. So I was reading articles in the American Psychological Association, the APA, and they had a defining for willpower. And they had willpower can be defined as, and they had a few statements: the ability to delay gratification, resisting short-term temptation in order to meet long-term goals. Like resisting a short-term temptation to go slap somebody in order to understand that your long-term goals is to restore your marriage to a healthy state. Like that slap didn't restore their marriage. It didn't. The problems they had before the slap are some of the same problems they're having after the slap. And I wouldn't be surprised if more conversation came out that's destructive to their conversation, because people don't recognize the need for change until they're forced to change. And hopefully, Mr. Smith understands that he needs to change. The next statement they read is for willpower is the capacity to override an unwanted thought, feeling, or impulse. You got to be able to override that. If you really knew the thoughts that went through this head at times, that I just don't give life to. There's some thoughts that come into your head that you're going to have to override. There's some people I want to slap, punch, kick, and do other things. But, there's a sense that you have to be in control. And I'm learning, like I said, I'm not one that has always been the most model citizen. Like I said, I've been a passenger of my rage. The next statement says the ability to employ a cool cognitive system of behavior rather than a hot emotional system. Cognitive, you got to be able to think. And that's why it says awareness, mindfulness, action, and then change. Because if you don't have that mindfulness, then you're not able to think. You're just going from awareness to action, and that action, without thinking about it, can lead you into a more emotional response than a cognitive one. So you want to make sure that and as men, we are logical beings. We're not supposed to be emotionally driven. Not to say that you don't have emotions. You do have emotions, and you need to understand them. You need to regulate them. You need to monitor them. You need to test them, because all emotions are not good emotions. All things that your emotions are trying to get you to do, some things it could be sabotaging you as well. The next statement is a conscious, effortful regulation of oneself by oneself. The conscious, effortful regulation of oneself by oneself. I mean, you regulate your own self. Regardless of what people are looking at you, don't let people paint you into the corner. Don't let people say you need to respond, you need to do this. You need to regulate yourself. Now, if he did it because that's what he wanted to do, then that's different. But if he did it out of an emotional response of what it was going to impact him in his marriage later on, then that's him being manipulated by her emotions. And I can call it manipulation by the simple fact that he laughed. When the joke first came out, he laughed. He was having a good time until he maybe got tapped on the leg and he just realized that she wasn't having as much fun in the joke that he had. But then his whole demeanor changed. And next thing you know, he's up out of his seat. And then the next statement is a limited resourceful capability of being depleted, meaning like you can't be at an emotional deficit and still expect to respond normally. I used to tell my ex at times, it says, you don't send a fat kid to the store hungry, because then everything there looks good. That's why you're not supposed to go to the grocery store hungry. Because when you go to the grocery store hungry and you're there for a particular thing, everything else sounds good. That's how you can go to the grocery store and you be trying to get some breakfast food for breakfast. And next thing you know, you got steaks, you got ribs, you got chicken, You got, you got potatoes, you got salad, because you're walking by everything and it looks good. So if you are entering into a state depleted, then you're more susceptible to emotional outbursts. And that's where the next statement in the APA article says, it says, when willpower fails, exposure to hot stimulus essentially overrides the cool system. Meaning, like, once you are at a depleted state, exposure to a hot stimulus, and the hot stimulus was a joke that his wife didn't approve of. Now that essentially overrides a cool system. When you're normally cool, collective, and you're normally like, water off a duck back and things doesn't bother you. But now when you are at a depleted state, now you're irritable. There's times where I know I have, and if you're honest with yourself, you have. You have been driving, you have been walking, you have went to work, and you have had that mindset, like, I wish somebody would say something to me today. That's because you entered that conversation or that mindset at a depleted state. There was something that was already irritating you, and you had had enough, and your patience has insufficient funds. Your ability to regulate yourself is now out the window. And you at a state like, I wish somebody would say something to me. And you start having conversations in your head about what you would do when this person says this or that. That's how you know you're at a depleted state. And I know that because I've been there many times. When your willpower has been tested, your brain may function differently. Like, you're not in your normal mind. That's how I know, because I've been a passenger of my anger. And then after I come down, I sit back and I was like, man, why'd you say that? Why'd you do that? Because I skipped a step. I went from awareness to action. I skipped that mindfulness. My daughter told me that one time too. She's like, Dad, there's nothing wrong with you being transparent at times, but you just got to be mindful of what that transparency may cause. So there's some times where I have to regulate what I say and how I say, so that you don't misunderstand the messenger and then delete the message because of the filter that is coming through. It's looking like this and it's sounding like me, and you're not hearing the message I'm saying. So sometimes I was guilty of, and I'm still trying to be, as I'm reforming my reality, grow into my higher self so I can regulate that a little more. So key points in discussion as far as willpower or the absence of willpower. Willpower is the ability to resist short-term gratification. We went over that. Willpower is correlated to the positive life outcomes, such as better grades, higher self-esteem, lower substance abuse, and greater financial security. So the more you get your willpower under control, the better your life will be. You will do better in school, you do better at work, your finances will start to improve, you won't have these impulses and stuff that you go through. And you're not gonna be perfect, I'm still reforming. So let's use this as a tool for us to get better. Individuals with low self-control show differing brain patterns presented when tempting stimuli is present. I mean, like, if you're irritated, your self-control is a lot more likely to fail you than if you had been well rested. Like I said, if, let's say, Will had just came into the Oscars and he had just had the most beautiful night with his wife, and they went out to dinner and they did all these things and it was just great, he would have been less stressed and less likely to act in that way had he not been in that depleted state. He would be like, my life is good, I ain't got to worry about that. And sometimes you're going to have to brush some things off. It goes into the article. It says willpower can be compared to a muscle that becomes fatigued when overused. Willpower was fatigued. He had to deal with entanglements. He had to deal with red top table talk. He had to deal with everybody seeing and knowing how his wife is moving, and then him responding in different ways. Speaking of that, he just got an Oscar even after he slapped a guy. And to be honest with you, the story of Venus Williams and what's her name, the Williams sisters. I thought that was one of his worst acting jobs. I enjoyed the storyline. I enjoy, how they walk through that process. But his acting specifically, that wasn't Oscar worthy for me. The story narrative was, I think Denzel would have been a better father than him. And this is no shade on him at all. I'm just saying I wasn't impressed with his acting at all. I thought it was one of his worst acting jobs, but that's, he was rewarded for that. Willpower depletion has a physical basis. Individual whose willpower has been depleted, your activity starts to decrease. And, he's got this show, the best shape of his life. As when you're going through that, sometimes you get out of shape. You get into these moods, you really don't want to do nothing. With the right motivation, you may be able to preserve your willpower strength when it has been depleted. So just having a depleted willpower doesn't mean that you give you a license to go out and slap somebody. If with the right motivation, if you say, you know what, I'm a child of the Most High, I'm going to govern myself accordingly, then you won't find yourself acting out and doing things of that nature. Just as muscles are strengthened by regular exercise, regularly exerting self-control may improve your willpower. Give you a short story. It's like when I opened up a bag of chips, like say I used to commute over an hour to work each day one way, sometimes an hour and a half, depending on weather. The longest it's taken me to get to work was 3 hours, and that's because it was in a snowstorm. But I would open up a bag of chips as I'm driving, and I would know that my hand is on automatic, going through the chips until the bag is empty. And it was just a learned behavior. And then I used to force myself. I was like, okay, you have some chips. Do not go back into that bag until you pass another 4 exits. And just trying to test my willpower. And sometimes, you go through and you're like, oh man, you find your hand just an automatic, like, hey, I wasn't supposed to touch it. So constantly exercising your willpower is going to get you to a point where you're able to increase it. And it'd be more beneficial for you to have increased willpower, because then you are able to govern yourself and your activities based off the way that you want to do things, not the way you're being forced to do things. So with that being stated, I'm coming up over 22 minutes. I'm going to do a third and final video on the absence of willpower and how we can take nuggets from there. So be well, young kings.